So let's finish up some points about the method or the methodology of the fuqaha. Again, what is their methodology? And I spent quite some time on it last time, so I hope everyone knows what's different between fuqaha and what do we call them? Theologians and mutakallimun. Faisal, what's the method of the fuqaha when it comes to usul al-fiqh? Pardon me? Yeah, what did we do last time? We spent about an hour and a half, okay, the last 45 minutes showing that there's a couple of approaches to usul al-fiqh. Yes. Okay, what is the approach of the fuqaha? And why was Uthman so upset with me by the time we were done? Okay. Not necessarily, by the way, Abu Hanifa, but they take the opinions of their Aimma, whether it be Abu Hanifa or Imam Muhammad or Imam Abu Yusuf. Okay? They start with these opinions and they go back from these opinions to figure out what is the usul of the Hanafi madhab. Okay, now why would you do it that way? What might be the reasoning behind that?
You know, I mean, you take for granted that the Qur'an is correct.
Okay. Not only that, according to the Hanafis, who is the greatest fuqaha who ever lived? No, sorry. Follow the madhab of Abu Hanifa. And they should follow his madhab because they consider his madhab the best. Okay? So if you want to follow his madhab, you have to figure out what is his usul. And since he didn't write it for you, you have to figure it out. Okay? Now, Uthman last time he said how could Abu Hanifa be considered a scholar if he didn't give his reasoning? Okay. But when you're asked a question and you give an answer to a question, there's actually 2 points to this. First is the way of the Hanafi or the Iraqi way of learning. Okay. The Iraqi way of learning was different from the Hijazi way of learning. For example, Imam Malik. Imam Malik used to lecture to the students. They come to class, like this one. And Imam Malik lectures to the students. And in fact, they were very shy even to speak when Imam Malik was lecturing. And they would be very happy if some foreigner, someone who's not regularly from the meeting, would come and ask Imam Malik a question. Okay. That was the Hijazi way of teaching. Iraq, how was the situation? What was the Iraqi way? Like ours, yeah. Informal. And the Iraqi way basically is they have a group of people and they throw out a topic and they discuss the topic. Everyone gives their views. And the Sheikh at the time, and when it was Abu Hanifa, when he was alive in his last years, many years, he was the Sheikh at the time. So they would discuss the point, and then at the end, he would give his conclusion. Okay? So when he gave his conclusion, he wouldn't necessarily repeat what everybody said, but he would give his conclusion. Now, if you're a writer, especially at that time, if you want to describe, what are you going to record? What's the most important thing to record? The most important thing to record is Abu Hanifa's conclusion. You're not going to have, for example, minutes of the meeting where you include everyone's argument. Okay? So that's one point. Second point, if you're asked a question, for example, Uthman, if I ask you, is the prayer obligatory? What's your answer? Okay? That's it? Okay, why? Okay, what is in the Qur'an? Okay. Okay. Is that the end of your... Okay. Is that the end of your answer? So if someone, in other words, if someone gave you an answer, if you went to a scholar and you said to him, is the prayer obligatory? And he said yes, because Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu aqimu as-salat. Would you accept that from him? Yes or no? No, I'm talking to him.
Yes.
Okay. But what's missing there? I mean, everyone would accept it. He gave you the evidence, and he gave you the conclusion. But what is missing? Huh? What's missing is the rule or the methodology that he applied. And that's what the fuqaha tried to figure out. So the rule that you're applying, in that case Uthman, was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders us, I'm assuming this is what the rule is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders us to do something. And we know, based on the Qur'an and Hadith, and also a little bit from the Arabic language, we know that an order implies obligation. Okay? So you left out that the reasoning, or you left out the methodology, but no one's going to question you. Okay? Now the second part, now that we figured out, or we think we figured out your methodology, is that that's not sufficient for us to derive, for example, Uthman's usul al-fiqh. Now we're going to derive Uthman's usul al-fiqh. Shouldn't take long. Okay? First of all, we claim that he says that an order implies obligation. Now, again, he didn't say it, right? Maybe perhaps he never said it. And that's what Shah Wali Allah wrote. He said most of these points that Al-Bazdawi he was talking about. Also his name is sometimes Al-Tazdawi. Shah Wali Allah said that most of the differences between the Hanafis and the Shafis, which some of them we're going to discuss later, some of these qawaid or some of these principles that make the Hanafis different from the Shafis, he said that Abu Hanifa never said them. And they are simply based upon the reasoning of the fuqaha who went to Abu Hanifa's conclusion and came up with these rules. Okay. But we're not finished with Uthman. Is that sufficient? Can we say, based on what Uthman told us, that anytime there's an obligation, anytime there's a command, it implies obligation? No. So what do we have to do now? No. We're talking about your usul al-fiqh. That's the point. The Hanafis, they don't look to the Sunnah. They're trying to figure out your, or Abu Hanifa's usul al-fiqh, or the Hanafi school's usul al-fiqh. What they have to do is they have to look at all of the statements they can find from you, in which there's an order and you make a conclusion. Okay? If they do that, obviously, they're going to find that in some cases there's an order, but Abu Hanifa did not say that the action is wajib or obligatory. Okay? For example, we gave an example of that earlier, that after you finish the Salat al-Jum'ah, in the Qur'an Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses an order, فَانْتَشِرُوا, that you should go out in the land. But no one of the ulama, they say no one. Let's always exclude the Zahir al-Madhab because you can never say for sure what they might come up with. No one says that's obligatory. So now we have to go to all of Uthman's statements and see where there was an order and he didn't say that the action is obligatory. And we have to figure out what are the exceptions and why are these exceptions in order to come up with his usul al-fiqh. And that's the Hanafi way. And if you pick up a Hanafi book of fiqh like those on a book of usul al-fiqh like those on the list I gave you, and many times they look more like books of fiqh than usul al-fiqh. If you look in the index, you're just going to see different fiqh points that are being discussed in order to come up with his usul al-fiqh. That the later Hanafis, if you remember the handout from last time, which was the list of books, okay, the later Hanafis, many of the later Hanafis, they took a new approach, which was combining the approach of the theologians or mutakallimun and the fuqaha. Okay, but those are the later Hanafis. And finally, is there any benefit to this approach? If there are any benefits, what are the benefits? So is everything clear now, Uthman? Different what? Abu Hanifa. Actually, even Well, one is inductive and one is deductive. And one you're starting with the conclusion and working your way back. This is the Hanafi way. See, the others, in some of the other books of Usul al-Fiqh by the Mutakallimun, they rarely discuss the fiqh issues, unless maybe to give an example. It is almost pure theory, based on the Qur'an and Sunnah. Now the later books that combine both, they try to go from the theory down to the fiqh point.
No, I'm wondering about one more thing. Now, if you're doing the Ahna doing that, isn't it risk to go against the Sunnah? I mean, when
yes.
it binds the rules, I mean...
That's what I said. You have to assume that the Hanafi madhab is correct. That's why I said that in that book by Al-Qaqi, Usul al-Qaqi, that his statement is not strange if you think about where he's coming from. To use an American expression. Okay? And if you think about where he's coming from, when he says that any verse or hadith that goes against our madhab is either abrogated or must be reinterpreted. Okay? I mentioned that I think last time. See, they are assuming, they have to assume that the Hanafi madhab is correct. Okay? The others, all of the others are almost completely independent of madhab. The others, for example, Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni, if you read his book Al-Burhan fi Usul al-Fiqh, which is considered one of the standard works of Usul al-Fiqh from the Shafi'i madhab, he disagrees a lot with Imam Shafi'i. And that is the nature of the other works. They are not confined to a madhab. They are free to use their mind to come up with any conclusion that they want. While this is not the case with the Hanafi madhab. And as many scholars, including Abu Zahra himself, Hanafi scholar, and Shawali Allah, that this way, the Hanafi way, was developed in order to defend the Hanafi madhab. Okay? So they were, as some writers say, they were muta'assib. They were sticking to their madhab, and this way was developed in order to defend their madhab.
What those ulama did was to give the approval of the Hanifa or to treat without the Hanifa way of thinking or way of doing fatwa agrees with that.
Yeah, basically, except for maybe a Debussy, Imam Debussy, the others were basically muta'assib, trying to show or trying to defend the Hanafi way and coming up with their own usul al-fiqh.
What's the status then among all the Sunnis or Al-Sunnah?
Well, Abu Hanifa, of course, is one of the greatest fuqaha of history, as Imam Shafi'i himself said. So we benefit, we non-Hanafis, excuse me for that saying we. They're not listening. The Turkish brothers aren't listening, so it's okay. We non-Hanafis, we benefit from that because we can learn from Abu Hanifa's madhab. And just because it's Abu Hanifa's madhab doesn't mean it's always wrong. Just kidding again, of course. we benefit from the reasoning of Abu Hanifa. And in some cases Abu Hanifa's reasoning might be better than the other ulama, and therefore we accept his reasoning.
I want to mention that through the history, the ways of taqlid or ta'assub,
no. In Usul al-Fiqh there is no such thing as taqlid. The door to ijtihad was never closed in Usul al-Fiqh. The best works of Usul al-Fiqh came after the so-called door to ijtihad was closed. And even those people who believed in taqleed in fiqh, they said that in usul al-fiqh, taqleed or blindly following a school is haram. Because to them, and also Imam al-Haramain was one of them, or al-Ghazali, and to them usul al-fiqh is like aqidah. There's no such thing as taqleed.
But the question, do you agree with me that for fiqh, they have to do taqleed?
We're not talking about fiqh.
Because fiqh is related to usul fiqh. Whether we like it or not.
Yeah, it's related to usul fiqh in the Hanafi madhab.
No. For example, the new ahkam, for example, if you want to, for example, you get a new thing and you want to apply the hukm, you have to go to usul fiqh. But what happens actually, people start, they stick to the fiqh and they try to keep it the same without taking new things or new happening.
That's true for fiqh, but not for usul fiqh. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that the discussion, even the arguments about what is correct in usul fiqh, and that people were free to discuss usul fiqh, this continued until today.
Because if you study usul fiqh and you develop it without implementing it, there is no.
But that's a different problem. That's a different problem now. They were prevented from implementing it. Okay? Some of them, not all of them, but in general, during the period of at least the darkest times of taqleed, they were prevented from applying it in public, but not about writing about it in their work. That's one way to escape that taqleed thing, that taqleed situation, is that in your book you write about it under a different topic. And you're making a new ijtihad, but no one notices it. Because you're not going to the mosque and saying it in a khutbah or something like that. But that's all we're going to cover about the history of usul al-fiqh. Is that plenty? 3 lectures or 2.5 lectures or so? Any questions about it? Before we begin the adilla or the evidences of usul al-fiqh. Any questions? Now is your last chance. So, inshallah, let's move on. Basically, there's 4 types of evidence that are agreed upon by all the scholars. What are those 4? Come directly out of Imam Shafi's Risala. Qur'an, Sunnah. What else? These are not necessarily the only sources of usul al-fiqh, but these are the 4 agreed upon sources of usul al-fiqh, and the other sources kind of fit underneath these. For example, the Hanbalis, they put lots of stress on statements of the Sahaba. Okay. My argument is that the statement of the Sahaba comes under these. I mean, because in there, where is it? No. One statement of the Sahaba, one Sahabi. That comes basically under here. Because the reason that the Sahaba are given the status that they're given is because, and it is based on the fact that they got their teachings from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and therefore they are understanding the Sunnah, and when they act, it is considered to be under the guidance of the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Also, for example, maslaha. Maslaha is not here, but also it fits. Or maslaha al-mustalah. It fits in a little way under qiyas. And you could argue that somehow it is there. And there's one verse in the Qur'an basically that covers all 4 of these. And Imam Shatibi wrote that usul al-fiqh is the explanation of this verse in the Qur'an. One verse points to all 4. All 4? One verse. No, I prefer it. I finished, so continue the ayah. Ilallah what? But okay, this verse, which is Surah An-Nisa, right? Yeah, what number? I hate that when people ask me in the lecture here. What surah is that? What number verse? Pardon me? So the verse says, O you who believe, obey Allah and the Messenger and those in authority among you. And if you differ in any matter, then take it to Allah and His Messenger. So it says obey Allah, which is clearly obeying the Qur'an. And then obeying the Messenger. Okay. And then here comes what about ijma'? Okay. أولي أمر منكم. يعني if the, for example, if the scholars agree on something, they are أولي الأمر, you should follow them. Scholars? More so than the and then فإن تنزعتم في شيء. Okay, what does it mean? Yani if you differ in something, refer to Allah and His Messenger. Okay, it means that while they're alive, you take it to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But after their death, yani if you differ in something, obviously if something is clear from the Qur'an and Sunnah, you shouldn't differ, right? So if you're differing in something, it should be something not clear from the Qur'an and Sunnah. So when it says take it to the Qur'an and Sunnah, it means that you are going to have to take your case and apply it to what the Qur'an and Sunnah says. So that covers qiyas. So usul al-fiqh is the tafsir. So we can change the name of this class from usul al-fiqh to tafsir. But we're just going to do tafsir of one verse. Okay. Now the adilla or the text of evidences can be divided into different categories. Okay. One is transmitted evidences versus, or as opposed to, not versus, I guess, rational. What do I mean by transmitted? Don't mean like a disease. Transmitted as opposed to versus, but I mean as opposed to. Vis-a-vis. How about that? Okay, so naqliya and aqliya. Okay. What are naqliya evidences? So under transmitted we have Qur'an, anything else? Anything else? Okay, ijma'. And ijma' is something transmitted. Once it's finished and it is final. Okay. The point about these three is that regardless of whether we actually understand them completely, or regardless of whether we can rationalize their existence, we have to follow them. Okay. These types of proofs we have to follow regardless of whether we have a complete understanding of them or not. Okay. In other words, these are unquestionable authorities. Okay. If they are established to be true, they are unquestionable authorities. We cannot go to a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, for example, and say that I don't understand this hadith, or I don't see how this hadith could be applied nowadays, for example, or something like that, and therefore reject it. These are unquestionable authorities that we have to submit to until the day of judgment. Okay, how about rational? Ijtihad. Qiyas. What else? Okay. Pretty much all, many of the others. How about that? Istihsan. That's everyone's favorite now. Okay. Masal al-Mursala or Maslaha. Again, if you don't understand these terms completely now, that's okay. Now there's also some other kinds of transmitted proofs, but they're not of the same authority as these, obviously. For example, a statement of a Sahaba is a transmitted proof, but it doesn't carry the same weight as these three. Okay. Now the question here is aql or is rationality by itself a source of law? And can you base something and simply on aql or rationality? No? So how are you going to do it then? Okay. And all of these types of proofs, the rational proofs, are actually dependent upon their relationship to the transmitted proofs. Okay? As one person wrote in a book of Usul al-Fiqh, talking about qiyas, istihsan, istislah, and istishab. I spelled it again wrong, by the way. That's why he said these are all basically rationalist doctrines. Okay. Then he writes, rationality alone is not an independent proof in Islam. Okay. In other words, you cannot come up with something and just try to prove it rationally and expect or say that this should be applied or false. So this is why rational proofs cannot be totally separated from the transmitted proofs. And the classic example of this is qiyas. Okay. Obviously you cannot make qiyas without reference to the transmitted evidence. Okay. And you're making qiyas on what? And you're basing your qiyas obviously on a verse in the Qur'an or hadith or so. So all of these rational proofs, or rationality, is not by itself an independent proof. They are dependent upon their relationship to the transmitted proofs. In other words, if you can find evidence for some rationalist argument in the Qur'an or Sunnah, then you could argue that that is to be followed or implemented.
How about the opposite argument?
Pardon me?
How about the opposite argument where you look at the transmitted case and see if there's no contradiction with the aql, then you say, okay. I mean, it's not like you see this a parallel. Instead, you say there's nothing here that says it's not okay.
Okay. What about with respect to the Qur'an, with what you said? And anyone who does that with respect to the Qur'an is kafir. Kafir. What? Anyone who does what he says. What were you just now? You don't understand his Algerian accent? Okay. He said suppose, what about the opposite way? That you go to these proofs, okay, and you judge it in the light of aql, and you decide whether to accept or not.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, I'm sorry. What did you say exactly?
I said that
we have it on tape, by the way.
I said that if you don't find something, I mean, you have a situation and you want to analyze it and give a ruling about it, and you go to the Qur'an and Sunnah and you don't find it, and you don't find anything, you don't find anything that can measure or can.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Really?
No.
We have witnesses, Uthman.
So if you find nothing that can compare to your situation, can you use the aql by saying, well, I didn't find anything, and anything like it? So
No. As the Imam Shatibi, I'm speaking now for him, like the Hanafis made the Hanafi fiqh for Abu Hanifa. I'm speaking for Imam Shatibi. If you're at that point, it means you're not a good faqih. Because there's guidance in the Quran and Sunnah for every aspect of life. If you go to the Quran and Sunnah and you don't find anything, okay, this means something wrong with you. Not no, there's many verses. ما فرطنا في الكتاب من شيء. Okay, I don't accept that verse because I believe the kitab in this verse is not referring to the Quran. If you read the whole ayah, it's not referring to the Quran. But anyway, that's another argument. But back to what you originally said, Uthman. And you cannot judge these on the basis of aql, with one exception. Okay? There's one exception. What's that? What about sunnah? Now, there's one exception with respect to the sunnah, and of course it is to be done by the experts in hadith, and that is if there is a hadith that undoubtedly goes against, like what I wrote earlier, irrefutable logic. or something that we can deny without any question. In other words, not a theory on our part, but something that we can deny without any question. Like a hadith that says that after 100 years the day of judgment will come. Well, we know now it's 1400 years, the day of judgment didn't come. Okay? This is a sign that the hadith is fabricated. Okay? As Ibn al-Jawzi wrote, any hadith that clearly goes against what we know to be correct, again, not theory. Not like some people with the hadith of the fly. That if you put if the fly gets in your drink, you should put it in completely. This is now a theory to say, oh, this hadith doesn't make any sense. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that is proven that is not correct. This is a sign that the hadith is fabricated. Okay, but obviously with respect to the Qur'an, there's no such argument in that. Because the Qur'an, we know that all of it is correct. Oh, sure. There's lots. No. They're all fabricated. I said that's the sign that the hadith is fabricated. Sahih al-Isnad doesn't mean anything. Sahih al-Isnad doesn't mean anything in this case. Suppose, okay, I'm going to fabricate a hadith. Okay? So I pick the best Isnad I could. Obviously, you're out. Yeah, the golden chain. Okay? I take a nayab from Sa'd, from Hamzaid, from Khalid. The age problem. So if I'm going to fabricate a hadith, I'm going to give it the best chain I can.
But what if the hadith is from Bukhari to...
Yeah, how do you know I'm a fabricator? How do you know that I'm a fabricator? One of the ways of knowing that I'm a fabricator is that I transmit hadith from people who are trustworthy, and the hadith are known, and I'm transmitting the hadith that are known not to be their hadith. Okay.
حديث عن البخاري متفق عليه الأرض بالسير متواتر كثير عن صحيح.
Okay, let me put it this way, a different way, okay? When these scholars of hadith, like the ones you mentioned, when they judge hadith, they also use this criteria. So for example, if the hadith is shadh, it contradicts the Qur'an. If it contradicts the Qur'an or contradicts mutawatir hadith, they will reject it. No. Anyone can make mistakes. Pardon? I gave one example about the Day of Judgment coming 100 years after the death of the Prophet. And we know that's not true.
No, it is.
Oh, the hadith which is sahih, and it contradicts? No, there is no such. Okay, that's your one.
One hadith like hadith, even if Bukhari, because he thinks, well, he is fabricated.
Now, as I said, if the rejection is based on a theory, we don't accept that rejection. That is not sufficient grounds to reject the hadith. Okay.
But who said those rules?
Huh? What do you mean?
I mean, when you say that in one case, okay, where you use hadith, is when you say it goes against the principle logic. Who said this rule?
Okay, this rule is simply logical.
Well,
I mean, this rule has some evidence for it from the time of the Sahaba.
just like stepping ball.
Wow, that's heavy, man.
I think you can find a book from the Qur'an. كمان معناها find some people that go to the king.
And I think this rule, there's some. We know that what the Prophet ﷺ, for example, said is true. Okay, we know that what he's saying is revelation from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Okay. So if that's the case, if someone says that he said something that we know for certain is false. It's not based on a theory again. Definition of a theory means it's testable. Something is a theory means you don't know whether it's true or false actually. Okay? Talking about an established fact.
Scientific fact.
What do you mean by scientific fact? Most scientific facts are theories. They are not facts.
Well, logic works with theory. That's my point. I'm not saying it.
No, okay. I'm not saying logic as the science of logic. Okay? I'm saying, for example, like the example I gave, that if someone tells you that the Prophet said that the day of judgment will occur 100 years after his death. If you want to look at that statement now, obviously there's other signs, as like Said pointed out. And the person that this hadith comes from, most likely he's going to be questionable anyway. I mean, there's other signs involved, but forget that. This is not a question of logic or not. What's the word for it? Common sense, intelligence, fact. That if I told you that the Prophet said after 100 years the day of judgment will occur, and we know now after 1400 years that the day of judgment hasn't occurred. Okay, so we reject that. It's not based on if you want to call it the science of logic, but it's based on something that's fitra actually. It's based on fitra. Well, logic, the problem is there's the science of logic and there's common sense. Sometimes the logicians are the last ones to have common sense. And if you study logic. Okay. Please. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Who set the rules?
Pardon me?
Who set the rules? Those who were Okay, you said common sense.
Okay,
Somebody else comes along and says, here are the rules. What is the criteria to create to found those rules? Right? You said common sense. Okay, fine. Now, what is the criteria also to come with those rules of common sense and something else?
Okay, I'm just talking about one small point. So, for example, the fact that if there's someone whose character is not good, or we have some doubt about his character, there's a verse in the Qur'an about if a fasiq comes to you, and you have to confirm what he says. Also, there's hadith that gives us similar meaning. So if you're talking about different rules, there's evidence for every rule. We discussed some of them last year in the hadith class. Do you remember? So anyway, the important thing to realize here is that the transmitted proofs are unquestionable authorities, and we have to accept them. While the other rational proofs, they are not independent proofs. They are still have to refer back to the transmitted proofs.
What if there is no reference to
no reference to it? And if there's no any in the deen, if you're going to make a statement or claim something, you have to have evidence for what you're saying. It's related to deen, right? So if someone tells you something and he gives you no evidence for it, no acceptable Islamic evidence, then you don't accept what he says. Is that the kind of situation?
No, let's say maslaha, for example, where there is no reference to Qur'an or Sunnah or Ijma'. It cannot be used as a type of evidence for...
Okay, with respect to maslaha, there's three types. There's a type which is clear from the Qur'an and the Sunnah. There's a type which is clearly rejected from the Qur'an and Sunnah. And there's a type in between. Okay? That type in between is what they call maslaha mursala. But even that type in between actually has some evidence for it. For example, yes, there is. The evidence may not be direct, but you can see it. For example, many scholars, when they talk about this concept, maslaha mursala, they talk about the Sahaba collecting the Qur'an. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ did not do it. There's no clear evidence from the Qur'an that they should have done it. Okay, but there's many evidences that, for example, it was the duty of the Sahaba to pass on the deen. It was the duty of the Sahaba to preserve the deen. It is the duty of the Sahaba to study the Qur'an and learn it. So when you collect the Qur'an, you're actually doing something that is benefiting all of these Islamic principles. So, and you'll not find a case that you cannot find any evidence for it. Unless you like Uthman again. Five. Any other questions about that? Yeah, I thought we'd go through these so quickly, but I guess not. But that's fine because I don't have much material anyway, so I'm trying to stall a little bit. Five. Another category, another way of dividing up the evidences, I guess this should be two, is the independent evidences vis-a-vis or as opposed to dependent, I guess. Huh? No, this is verses, but I don't really mean verses. Okay. Dependent. Okay, what do we mean here? Yeah, it is completely different from this one in one way of looking at it, but in another sense it's almost the same as that one. What do we mean here? Okay, if you remember what I was saying about aql, you'll understand what we mean here. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, but what do you want? What's the question?
Okay, you know what independent means, and you know what dependent means, obviously. Okay, there's some pieces of evidence that if you're given those pieces of evidence, they are sufficient in themselves. Okay, they're not necessary, but they're sufficient. They're not always necessary. But if you're given that piece of evidence, it's sufficient in itself. It doesn't need any other. For example, the Qur'an, okay, hadith, or sunnah. It's called sunnah. What about ijma'? Is ijma' an independent source or is it a dependent source? Well, that depends. Okay. Suppose you're from the madhab or the school that says that every ijma' must have some basis or some evidence from it in the Qur'an and Sunnah. Okay? Some people say that every ijma', Ibn Taymiyyah was one of them, has to have some support or be based on something. Every ijma' must be. I hate that when teachers do that on the board when they start writing and then they put words before and after. Because always when you're writing in your notes you just every ijma' must be based on Qur'an or Sunnah. That's what Ibn Taymiyyah said. For example, he said some ijma' they're based on hadith. We may have lost the hadith. I don't agree with that statement, but he says we may not know, or at least we may not know the basis for it. But we have the ijma'. So thinking about this now, is ijma' an independent or dependent? But once the ijma' is made, it is no longer rest upon the Qur'an. So it is independent. Okay. No, once ijma' is made, it is an independent source. In other words, no.
After it's made.
No, in other words, with respect to ijma', if there's ijma' on something, you don't have to know what was the source of the ijma'. Well, qiyas and the others, you have to know.
Yeah. But some scholars like Shafi, they didn't say that ijma' is a source.
Yes. That's why I said that if you're from that school. Yeah, that's why I said if. Okay. You're from the dependent school, huh? Okay, over here is what? Over here, obviously, is every source of law or every form of evidence that needs to have some proof for it from the Qur'an wa Sunnah wa Ijma'. So, pretty much the same as what we had down here. Qiyas, istihsan, maslaha al-musada. Yes. Yes, he's the dean of the school, so. Huh? Oh, the table. Is that all you want? Yes, Ali. Would say that it's not necessary for the ijma' to be based on Qur'an and Sunnah. Others, actually, the others are arguing from another point of view. They are arguing actually that it's not possible that you're going to have ijma if it's not based on Quran and Sunnah. That's actually what they argue.
But you know any example?
Not right now, but maybe when we get to ijma, I might come up. Huh?
Because once you say it's unquestionable authority, then we should know why it is unquestionable authority. If it is not there.
Yeah. We'll get to that. Just a
They
second.
have to live in the case.
أيوة.
I think it is without any.
Okay. Yeah, he's trying to prove his school. Obviously, we know what school he's from. Yeah. Yeah. As I said, some scholars say there has to be evidence. Some say there isn't. In the case of Ali and the flogging of the alcohol drinker, there is evidence from the Quran and Sunnah, because it was based on qiyas.
Can you tell us which part of Quran and which part of Sunnah this is like before we can get grab something specific? Inshallah.
What do you mean by which part? For example, in this case, okay, there's ijma'. Okay, there's ijma' that was made during the time of the Sahaba. That the one who drinks alcohol, what is the punishment for the one who drinks alcohol? Okay, first of all, what was the punishment during the Prophet's time? Okay, during the time of the Prophet and during the time of Abu Bakr, the punishment was not fixed. Sometimes it was 40 floggings, sometimes it was less, sometimes it was more.
But in the Prophet's period, it was important.
It wasn't fixed. It wasn't fixed. Listen to what he's saying. La hawla wa quwwata illa billah. If it was fixed, then what were Umar and the others discussing? And it wasn't fixed. That's why they discussed. Okay? So you're saying this is the ijma' which is not based on the Quran and Sunnah? No, that's what you said. Pardon me? Yeah, let's get to that, okay? You say there's no evidence for it. But in fact, Ali... Let's get back to the qiyas, okay? He made...
This is an important point to me that you were taught about this example, because I'm not familiar with all the schools and all the scholars which you are making reference to. There is some evidence in the Sahih that the Prophet ordered that no punishment, or explained that no punishment for the consumption of the khamr was given by Allah, and so therefore there was prescribed. So therefore he ordered that there would be no punishment to offenders. Now, this, because this was question of Sahaba to him, how should the offenders be treated? And so we are looking for concrete evidence that, in fact, as I can explain to it in English in translation, that the explanation was given that punishment of an offender is helping shaitan against the offender, and so the Sahaba did not practice. According to Al-Bukhari, did not practice punishment of offenders. So now, in view of that, in later times, punishment somehow came up as an issue and became a practice. And this is the point I think we are interested in. So we have concrete evidence and not just, about the matters of peace.
Yeah. But the case you're referring to is a different case. The case you're referring to is a case where someone drinks and it's not proven Islamically that he drinks. That's what the hadith is about. The Prophet ﷺ, in fact, is a very harsh hadith, which most of the scholars say is mansukh or abrogated. The Prophet ﷺ said if the person drinks once, you should flog him. If he drinks again, you should flog him. If he drinks again, you should flog him. If he drinks the fourth time, kill him.
Can you quote the authority on this one? Because I would like to know.
This hadith is in Sunan Abu Dawud. And I think you'll find it in Mishkat al-Masabih in English.
As far as I know, it's not included in the collection of Bukhari.
No, it's not in the Bukhari. Okay. So, back to this now. Back to Abdurrahman's madhab. Ali made a qiyas on what? He made an analogy on what? Qadaf. He made an analogy of Qadaf, or the slanderer. That the qadaf, or the one who makes qadaf, he is supposed to be flogged 80 times. So he said the one who drinks, and he speaks, and when he speaks he makes qadaf. So he should be So that is the punishment that they agreed upon at that time. Before that time it was flexible. Yes, this is qiyas. This qiyas is based on Quran and Sunnah. So the question is, was that ijma actually based on Quran or not? You said no before, now you say yes. Okay. This qiyas, Imam Ali said that when the person drinks, he starts to talk. And when he talks, he's saying things which, I don't remember his exact wording, but it goes like this. Now, بعدين? لا, there's at least 3 sentences. Hey, that's the reason. Right? Yes, sure.
Rule that says no had can be used from jihad, must be from Quran.
Had, yeah, by definition, had is a limit prescribed by Allah. Hey, but that in the Hanafi fiqh cannot be done by qiyas. This is qiyas. Okay, in other words, you apply the same rule to a similar situation, which is slightly different. Then, when they say that you cannot make had by ijtihad or a legal punishment, like those described in the Quran by ijtihad, they are saying that you cannot bring a new punishment or a new had, for something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not prescribe a had for. But if you have a case which is similar to the ones that Allah prescribes had for, then you may use the same punishment. See the difference between the two? Okay, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not prescribe any had for what? Quickly. Riba, for example. We cannot now make a specific had and say it is 40 or 60. Unless it's based on qiyas. We're saying we have a similar case, like Ali, saying that the one who drinks makes qadr, so therefore we punish him in the same way. See the difference between the two? If someone kills or someone plots to kill, plotting to kill is not directly mentioned in the Quran. But if someone has a hand in killing someone else, even though he's not the killer, according to Umar al-Khattab, he gets the same had punishment. He did not make a new had punishment, but he's saying that this had applies to this case. This is called tatbiq, applying the had in other cases.
In this case, you have to follow the ijma', or you can do like 40 instead of 80.
No. Once the ijma' is made, you have to follow. Abdurrahman was trying to give an example of ijma' which is not based on the Quran and Sunnah. Some ulama, as I said, Ibn Taymiyyah, for example, said that every ijma' is based on Quran and Sunnah. Yeah, you're talking the one who drinks alcohol, it was qiyas, based on the punishment for qadr. 80. Right? Similarity is in the sense that Abu Saud said. Let's begin Abu Saud, Ali's statement.
The point which I didn't know that it is not excuse me,
yes. Okay, what does it mean? That's why I'm avoiding it also. Qadr is a type of slandering that is to be punished. Like, for example, calling your brother an adulterer. Hey.
Can you give me a famous Quran from the other side?
From the other side? That says what?
It doesn't begin from the...
Imam Shafi, you gave it.
It doesn't begin from Quran.
Hey, it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to have a source in Quran. Inshallah, we'll get to that more when we talk about ijma', if we ever get to to talk about ijma'. Well, this is... I'm sorry, any more questions about independent, dependent? Dependent, are these similar proofs I use? Okay? The third category is definitive. Vis-a-vis Look, over there I put verses, here I put a minus sign, now I'm putting plus. So take your pick. Speculative. Okay. Anybody not know what the word speculative means? Okay, this is qat'i in Arabic, this is dhanni. Qat'i means it can only have one, basically what it means, okay? There's no question about what it means. Speculative means it is open to interpretation. Okay, it could have more than one meaning. So some proofs are definitive in their scope. For example, what's the punishment for zina in the Qur'an? But English. Okay. The word 100 stripes or 100 floggings, would you say that's speculative? And assuming you're not from some far off branch of the Sufis, would you say that's speculative or definitive? Definitive. Okay, 100 means 100. There's not much you can do with it. Okay? But there's other verses that, and there's a wording used, and the wording has more than one meaning. So this is called speculative. Okay? Now there's some more points that we should consider here. Definitive is not open to question, not open to interpretation, not open to interpretation, question. Okay? So obviously ijtihad only occurs with respect to the speculative forms of evidence. There's no such thing as ijtihad when it comes to this. Pardon? Hey, I mean,
something different, and still, in certain circumstances, you need to give an idea whether it's speculative or not.
I'm not sure. We're talking about evidences here, okay? For example, a verse in the Qur'an. The words of the Qur'an have one meaning, or do they have more than one meaning? If they have more than one meaning, it's speculative. If they don't, it's definitive.
No, you said something, I know. You said something that it's not open to interpretation, it's something
hey.
That's a statement. I'm saying that there are some exceptions to what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm asking this statement. He said it's not open to interpretation, no matter what. I'm saying, how about that? I know that in normal cases of different things,
hey. Okay. Okay. Hey. Okay, I'm not sure how to handle that question. How about that? Okay. So speculative only takes place in ijtihad. Oh, excuse me, ijtihad only takes place in speculative. Yes. Yeah, but that doesn't affect the fact that the dalil is still definitive.
Yeah, but you don't do it for yourself. You need somebody else to stand for you.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Okay, I mean, you don't say, well, I'm really good.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay. I still don't know how to answer you, but I see what you're saying. Okay. Evidences, yes. Okay, now, another point to remember that some people, especially nowadays unfortunately, when we say that something is speculative, it doesn't mean, when we say that something is dhanni, that it's open to many opinions and all those opinions are acceptable. Okay? That's not what it means. Number one, for example, a verse in the Qur'an may be speculative by itself. Okay, if you just take it by itself, it's a speculative. But if you look at it in the light of other verses in the Qur'an, or the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, or Ijma', it can become qati' or definitive. Okay, in other words, one verse in the Qur'an may use a word that has different meanings. What's the meaning of that word? Or if you go to other verses, it's explained, or it's explained in the hadith, and so forth. So just because something is speculative, by itself doesn't mean actually that we don't know the meaning of it, or it's open to interpretation. Not always, because it might be explained. If it is explained, then it becomes definitive. Okay? If it is explained, it becomes definitive. By another verse in the Qur'an, by hadith, or by ijma'. Okay? Now, also, just because the evidence is speculative, it doesn't mean that our conclusion regarding that evidence is not definitive. Okay? This is an important point. Just because the evidence is speculative, it doesn't mean that our conclusion, yani the ahkam or the rules that we get from that evidence, are not definitive. For example, and what I mean by definitive here is that what the faqih does, this is the job of the faqih, is that he looks at the different evidences and he can show that one of them is stronger than the other. So even though the evidences might be speculative, the conclusion is definitive. Okay? If the faqih cannot show which one is definitely stronger of the different opinions, then what? If, for example, there's three possible opinions or meanings for something. If the faqih cannot show which one is definitively stronger, then what must he do? Huh? No. He must not say anything. He must not say anything. And his conclusion has to be qat'a, has to be definitive. If he cannot weigh between the two, he should not say anything. No, that's what I'm saying. And if he cannot, there's three opinions and he cannot say which is stronger, then he cannot say anything. No, that's my point. That if he can make tarjih using the principles of usul al-fiqh, the ruling is no longer speculative, it becomes definitive. Huh? For himself, yes. It is definitive. Let's take an example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Qur'an is talking about, did I do something? is talking about, for example, if you don't have, trying to remember the verse, I cannot remember it. Okay, it's the verse. It's the verse. It's in the which area? The beginning of the Quran. Okay, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the cases in which you may make tayammum, okay, or make, before that, okay, mentioned, for example, when you okay, when you touch women, or لمستم النساء, how to spell it? لمستم طيب. Okay, what do you think? This verse, okay, you know the verse that we're talking about? Talks about this, and if you for example, came from the bathroom, or if you're sick before that, or if you did this thing, we'll translate it for the time being. No, these are Hanafis, they're going to say, this is not the right translation. Okay, if you touch women, okay, these are the things that mean you have to make wudu, or in other words, your tahara is broken, and since you don't have water, in this case, the verse is referring to tayammum. Okay, so what about this evidence? Is this, and obviously from everyone's reaction, is this a definitive evidence or is it speculative? Why is it speculative?
You cannot say that the lamentum means only that. It can be
Okay. Okay. Just a second now. So the problem here is that this word is open to more than one meaning. So if it's open to more than one meaning, it becomes speculative. Okay. But does that mean necessarily that the conclusion we're going to make from this is going to be speculative or not? The answer to that question is if we can show that one opinion is stronger than the other. Okay? Now most of the things in fiqh are what? Most of the conclusions in fiqh. Conclusions in fiqh now. Are they mostly speculative or definitive? definitive? Okay, some people nowadays, like episodes, they are claiming that they are mostly speculative. Okay, but in fact that is not the case. For example, Ibn Taymiyyah in his introduction to Tafsir al-Kabir, he wrote the vast majority of the fiqh points that people are in need of and ask about are confirmed either through textual evidence, nusus, or ijma'. There's only speculation and dispute and very few things that people are in need of. Many of the disputed opinions on matters that rarely occur. What the people need of knowledge concerning what is obligatory upon them, or forbidden, or permissible is definitely known. What is known of the deen by darura also is part of fiqh. In other words, everyone knows that salat is wajib. This is part of fiqh. And he goes on to say that something of the deen, of the religion being known by darura or necessity, or something that you have to know, this is a relative term. For someone who is new to Islam, or a Bedouin living in the desert, and he will not know many of these things. But for the ulama, almost everything is qat'i. You will not find any ulama who doesn't know, for example, the Prophet ﷺ made sajdah, or that the Prophet ﷺ attributed the child to the bed or the product from which came from. This is something they call okay. What does this term mean? Okay. Rajhan means what? Which one weighs more? Okay. Showing or finding which one weighs more. Not weighs more, that's not very good. Which one is stronger, okay? Yes, I know. Brother. And what does this mean? What does this really mean? It doesn't mean believe. It means something confirmed in the person's mind. There's no dhan related to it. And this is what the faqih does. And with most of the ahkam, you come to this conclusion, that the faqih is able to show which is stronger, without any question. So although many of the evidences are speculative, as in this example we'll go through, and the conclusions are qat'i.
It doesn't mean that they are the same. But for us that they are the same.
What means the same?
The conclusion.
In general, they will be the same. They'll be different if one of the scholars missed the point or something like that. But when you see that he missed the point, it's clear that he missed the point. Okay. One of the best books, by the way, for this kind of discussion is this book by Ibn Rushd, Bidayat al-Mujtahid, and in which he discusses the reasoning behind the conclusions of the fuqaha. Yes, Saeed. It is definitive in using the principles of usul al-fiqh. One of the arguments can be shown to be clearly or without question stronger than the other.
But there is still a question whether there is assurance that this is the hukm of Allah. Because the mas'ala is subject to ijtihad, so he does not know the hukm for sure, and this is the hukm.
No, but using these principles, and he's saying that there is clarity that this is the correct point. Now, if you missed, as I said, if you missed the point, you missed a hadith or something like that, which is common, that's something else. Then it's easy to go through the argument and show that it was a mistake. The point is that the conclusions in general, especially among the ulama, and most of them are not something
So when we go back to the point we started with,
which was
that anything under the madhab is wrong, could be, right?
no, they didn't say that. They said no. What they said is something different, because they said any hadith or verse. Okay, this is a problem in methodology. And because you have to start with the hadith and the verses first and then go down. No. No.
Otherwise it has to say something about the
Yeah, I said that their way of thinking is first you have to assume that Abu Hanifa is correct. Yeah? And they're not going to follow Abu Hanifa if they believe he's wrong. Yeah, but we're talking about these scholars who wrote these books on Usul al-Fiqh. Not Abu Hanifa, as I said, not Abu Hanifa, but the Hanafi madhab. There's a difference between Abu Hanifa and the Hanafi madhab. Yani Shaybani statements, Abu Yusuf statements, these are all part of the Hanafi madhab. Yeah, but he's a little bit later. Yeah, he was mujtahid. He did not write also a book like this. Huh? Yeah, he wrote a small, but not like the ones I was pointing to. Yeah.
Two scholars came up with two contradicting ahkam. And they used this knowledge to show the stronger point. And as you said, we consider those to be definitive.
Yeah, it is based on their usul, okay? And their usul, you can study their usul to show which one is stronger.
Yeah, but those two ideas are concerning one issue.
Yani for the mujtahid himself, they are both qat'i, yani he has to follow them. If he's really a mujtahid, that's another question. So let's go through this example anyway, to see how we can get from this statement in the Qur'an, which is obviously speculative, to an opinion which is, the Ibn Rushd shows, it is the opinion. That's nice, huh? Yeah, there are three opinions about what does it mean, touching women. What are they? We'll go by madhab, Hanafi, what do you say? Most of you, you're the only representative of the Shafi'i madhab, so you have to... Oh, I'm sorry, two representatives. Okay. Mukhtar. No, Mukhtar is mujtahid, mutlaq. He's not from these. So, Hanafis, what do they say? Hanafis say? Okay, they say that this means, touching women means sexual intercourse. Okay? Because in the language it could either mean touch or it could mean sexual intercourse. Either one is a possibility. Okay? It is the intensive form, which implies in this case, what? Huh? The intensive of lamastum implies what, according to Qur'an? No, it implies that it is action from both sides. Okay. Action from both sides. Yeah, means what? Pardon me? Mutual. Okay, yeah, mutual. That's right. Mutual. Sorry about that. Said confused. Okay. What do the Malikis say, most of us? Touching with intention. Okay, the strongest opinion in the Maliki madhab, pardon me, North African, touching, okay, not just with intention but with pleasure. Okay, touching with pleasure. Now this is the strongest opinion. This comes directly from Imam Malik. Okay, the Shafi'is, there's only three madhabs in this class. Huh? Hanbali, okay, there's two riwayas from Ahmed. One is this one. One is this one. That's one of his riwayat. There's three narrations from Ahmed. So why should we put Hanbalis up there? Shafi'is are what? Brother from Hadramaut. Touch, any kind of touch. Right? Okay, any kind of touch. In other words, they are taking the literal. Okay. Now, as هذا الضرورة that Osman was talking about. But now, as I said, the verses, they're not supposed to be taken just by themselves and say this is speculative or this isn't. Okay. So we have to go now from here to go to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that explain it. Okay. There's one hadith, the hadith of Aisha, in which she said that when the Prophet ﷺ used to pray tahajjud, sometimes when he makes sajda, he would touch her leg, and she would have to move her leg. Right?
So the Prophet not
Yes. Yes. Okay, what does this mean? Just a minute, brother. Boy, you really see who are the believing in their madhabs in a class like this. Okay, what about you're all familiar with this hadith, eh? What does that mean for the three opinions that we have here? No, and he doesn't say anything about these two. And he touched Aisha and he didn't make wudu. Okay. No, but it led some Shafis to say that not just any touch, but only the touch which is skin against skin. Okay? They're saying that the Aisha had something covering herself, so therefore, this is what they argue. They offer no dalil for that. Okay? Okay. Third, or another thing to look at is the hadith of Aisha. Another hadith of Aisha. Second hadith of Aisha. So that's a good point, by the way, Saeed, that they have no evidence for this condition. The second hadith of Aisha says that the Prophet ﷺ kissed some of his wives. The Prophet ﷺ kissed some of his wives and went to pray without making wudu. That's what the hadith says. Okay? What does this mean now? Now according to the Malikis, okay, if you read their books of fiqh, okay, according to the Malikis, if you read their books of fiqh, kissing, any kind of kissing, it implies pleasure. What do we do with the Shafi madhab here? We have no problem with the Shafi madhab because we just make a new Shafi madhab. That's the way we do it. Every time. Because Imam Shafi talking about the second hadith, he said if that hadith is correct, then that's my madhab and you don't have to make wudu from. Okay, in other words, he mentioned the hadith. He said if that hadith is correct, then that is my madhab and you don't have to make wudu Ahmed from touching wood. Okay? And he did not have enough information about the hadith. The scholars of the hadith say that this hadith is authentic. And there's very little, in fact there's no question about it. Okay? So that means this opinion actually never existed. In essence. And all those Shafi'is who were following that and trying to force it upon us is have another. Now you're talking about another question. That's another question. We're just talking about touching women. So okay, we'll get to it. If you do anything with your wife and you cause madhi to come, then you have to make wudu. You have to wash and make wudu. Okay. Now what does that do for this madhab? Questionable. According to the Malikis, that's what they themselves say. Okay. So this madhab goes clearly against this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. No. The Malikis say that kissing of any kind is pleasure. They say pleasure, not extreme. Okay? So Ibn Rushd, the Maliki, and when he comes to this point, he just wipes this off. He doesn't even bother to defend it. Al-Qurtubi, he tries to defend it. Comes up with two arguments as similar to what Said said about the skin argument. There's no evidence for his argument. So now if we interpret this verse in the light of these two hadiths, which is how the Sharia is supposed to be done, it's not a verse by itself coming from nowhere, but it's related to the life of the Prophet in the hadith, his statements, his life, and the other verses. What is the irrefutable conclusion about this? Well, we're left with only one. And I picked this example to show the Hanafi brothers that I am not always against the Hanafi. The position of Abu Hanifa is clearly, and then also if you add this fact to it, it just strengthens the Hanafi position. So although the verse itself is speculative and open to many different interpretations, in fact there's even more than these three. And when you take the verse as a whole with the rest of the Sharia, the ruling or the verse becomes qat'i'. There's no reason for any difference of opinion. Now, yeah, this is a better example, because in that case you're talking about something which is general that has been very clearly specified by hadith. But here you're talking about a situation where the Prophet and his words didn't really say it, but it is clear from his actions. Okay, any questions about that? Should only see 9:30. Alhamdulillah. See, mashallah, the class goes so fast you didn't even realize what happened.
We are left with only first one?
Yeah, because of this hadith. Prophet ﷺ kissed his wife. Actually,
you said we are touching without that's ultimately.
Yeah, that's what the verse is referring to. The verse actually can refer. Thought someone was coming in. The verse could have one of two meanings. Okay? These conditions that the Malikis put on it, there's no actually evidence for it. It's either this one or this one actually. No. We're just talking about a touching woman. Now, here, that was a different point that he wanted me to make. It's not related to this. We're just talking about touching women. What's the meaning of touching women here? It isn't touching women.